third speaker is Jeff Jordan from Rescue Social Change, a group that he founded at the age of 17 after volunteering for a youth anti-tobacco program, or being part of that group. So welcome, Jeff.
Thank you very much. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is I kind of get to be the bad guy a little bit. All right, so I'm a specialist in what we call confrontational presenting. And the idea here is that we are a little too nice to each other. There are many, many more bad social marketing campaigns than there are good ones. And every time we let that bad social marketing campaign go by, make a presentation, be part of a workshop, another government official that controls funding says, I'm not putting any money into that. And the next guy who has a really good idea to do a social marketing campaign suddenly can't find funding. Not because his or her idea was bad, but because we, as a community, did not stand up when something wasn't right. So I'm going to start by rapping. So I'm wearing a bow tie, so you can obviously tell I'm probably not a rapper, but I'm gonna go for it. This is by an artist called Macklemore, which some of you may be familiar with. He has a hit song right now called Thrift Shop, but I'm not rapping that song, although it's great. $100 for a pair of shoes I would never hoop in. Look at me, I'm a cool kid. I'm an individual, yeah, but I'm part of a movement. My movement told me to just do it. I listened to what that swoosh said. Look at what that swoosh did. See, it consumed my thoughts. Are you stupid? Don't crease them, just leave them in that box. Strangled by these laces. Laces I can barely talk. That's my air bubble, and I'm lost if it pops. We are what we wear what we are. But see, I look inside the mirror and think, Phil Knight tricked us all. Will I stand for change or stay in my box? These Nikes help define me, but I'm trying to take mine off. This is from a song called Wings that if you have a chance to view the full video and listen to Macklemore, who does a much better job, I recommend it. And I like these lyrics because it crystallizes 2 points. The first point is it crystallizes why public health and the government is so scared of branding. They're scared of branding because they see it as manipulation. They see it as forcing people to do things that they don't want to do. And they're scared of anything that is not directly in your face explaining exactly, hello, my name's Jeff and I'm trying to make you stop smoking. Anything that doesn't tell you that directly is scary. But then at the same time, this crystallizes the lure and the fantasy of branding. The idea that any of us can hire an ad agency, spend some money, and make a commercial, and suddenly we will be as powerful as Nike. We will do something just as great as they did. Why? Because I have an ad agency. Why? Because I put money into it. And so now I'm going to be able to change the world. Both of those are incorrect. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is why we need to look a little bit more in the middle and be a little bit more critical of ourselves in order to progress this entire movement of social marketing. My name is Jeff Jordan. I'm from Rescue Social Change Group. We specialize in social change marketing, behavior change marketing. That's all we do. I'm from California, and we're spread around the country there. And our programs are spread around the country as well, in specific states in the US, as well as we're leading a new $150 million effort for the FDA to reduce smoking amongst African American, Asian, Hispanic, and LGBT teens in the US. The first time those groups have been targeted directly. It's really, really exciting. And as Jennifer mentioned, I started when I was a teenager, and so did some of the other folks here in our agency. But what she didn't mention was what triggered me to move into this audience when I was just a kid. And what it was that I was volunteering for an anti-tobacco movement in Southern Nevada, where I grew up, and that health district hired an advertising agency. And I'm not going to, say their name or anything, but it hired this agency, and I was one of the youth. I was one of the target audiences, and I got to see firsthand everything that they were doing, and I realized that they had no idea what they were doing. They wasted all of our money in 3 months and left, and then I went to my program director and said, so what do we do now? And it's like, well, anything that's free we can do now. And I said, well, what about all the money we had when we started with? To me, we had like $100,000. That was like, we were rich. We were rich in the eyes of a 17-year-old, and it was like, well, that's how much that event that they did cost. And I said, you mean the event that had a whole bunch of non-smokers that were never going to smoke in their lives, that gave away free t-shirts and glow sticks to everybody? Yeah, that event. Okay. Well, great. I think I could do this better next year. And somehow, I don't know, maybe they were using substances that day, but they agreed to let me do it the next year. And that's pretty much how Rescue started. And what I learned that day, and as I started, was that commercial marketing is not the same thing as behavior change. Not at all the same thing. And because the definition of social marketing is the application of commercial marketing principles to cause positive social change, we are under the illusion that any kind of commercial marketing can be used to cause behavior change. But that, in fact, is not true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over 4 key differences. That if we forget these differences, this entire movement will struggle to get the funding that it needs to really cause change. And the first difference is that most commercial marketing doesn't aim to change behavior. Not that it doesn't do it, it's that it doesn't even try to do it by design. Why is that? Well, you look at Pepsi and Coke and you say, all right, you know, they're awesome, amazing brands, very successful brands. I want to be just like them. Well, you look at the top secret, you know, plans of what Coke's strategy is, and you'll see 101 ways of how they're going to take Pepsi's customers. But you will never see a strategy to turn a bottled water drinker into a Coke drinker. You won't see a strategy to turn an organic juice drinker into a soda drinker, because that's not their business. They have bottled water companies and juice companies and all sorts of companies to cater to all the needs of everybody. They're not there to change your behavior. They are simply there to change your brand preference, to turn one brown soda drinker into another brown soda drinker. That's not behavior change. That's brand preference change. And brand preference change is fundamentally different from behavior change. All you have to do is get a person to remember your brand the next time they walk into the 7-Eleven and like you more than they liked the other guy, for that one moment when they're going to make that purchase. But that only works when someone's already engaged in the behavior. When we talk to uninformed ad agencies, what they'll often tell us is, oh, well, we got to make something flashy and memorable and eye-catching, and you know, it's going to go viral, and it's going to be amazing, and it's going to do all these things, and our creative director is a genius. Don't question him. But in reality, we don't need any of those things. What we really need is we need to be persuasive. We need to change something. We need to be relevant to people's lives. They don't actually have to like us. They could hate us. The most successful tobacco prevention programs for adults in the US, in Australia, in the UK, were campaigns no one really liked, but they worked. They worked because behavior change is different from commercial marketing. Now, there are some exceptions. And the introduction that I gave you with Nike is one of those exceptions. There are some brands that have gone so far, that have been so successful, that they have actually been able to change behavior. The way that Apple was able to change everybody, literally, from CD players to MP3 players. The way that Starbucks convinced us that for some reason coffee is worth $4 a cup. The way that Nike today could introduce a new sport and people would play it just because they are Nike. This is true. There are some brands who have caused behavior change. However, they are the exception, not the rule. And they did not achieve this with a TV commercial that some creative director came up with. They achieved it with a team of folks that for decades, or in Starbucks' case, maybe years, but was committed to a vision that creative was just one part of. That it was something that they saw the market and they were able to commit, no matter how many different agencies they worked with, no matter how many different pieces of creative they had, they were able, as the company themselves, to drive that change and to drive those associations that needed to be formed. Unfortunately, in the government, a lot of times we don't drive that ourselves as government officials. We let our creatives run wild. And wild creatives go in a lot of directions. That's why they're creative people. But what these companies do is not let their creatives run wild. What they do is they have a vision and a mission. And they follow that so specifically that they're able to create these brands that truly are incredibly powerful. Unfortunately, most commercial advertising agencies don't understand how to do this kind of behavior change. If you look at most brands out there, we wouldn't compare them to Nike and to Apple. We would compare them to the used car dealership in our neighborhood, because that's pretty much the power that that brand has. And that is true for most advertising campaigns. Most advertising campaigns fail. Most advertising campaigns are not changing the world. And we have to stop believing that just because we make something creative, we will change the world. That's not how it works. So, next time you tell yourself, or if you're sitting there telling yourself, oh no, I'm different, your agency, your campaign is probably the rule, not the exception. And I'm sorry to be the one to say it, but we have to start saying it. Because if we don't start talking about what doesn't work, we will never be able to convince everyone else that social marketing should be invested in. Difference number 2. Changing behavior is significantly different from changing brand preference. To change behavior, you must change something that influences behavior. You can't just be funny, memorable, shocking, or attention-getting. Brian earlier talked about what they did when they went into the lunchroom. I bet you that if Brian wasn't there, and if instead a creative director was there, they would have created a TV commercial that told you how wonderful apples are compared to pizza. And I bet you that nothing would have ever changed, because that TV commercial didn't do anything. It didn't actually change anything. When Brian went in, he didn't say, well, the first thing we have to do is start putting posters up around the school and tell people to eat healthier. He said, let's change something. Let's physically change something that is happening. And too often we forget that social marketing actually has to do that. It can't just remind people that there's a better choice. It can't just remind people that they're acting unhealthy. It has to change something. Either it educates someone about something they didn't know. It changes something through policy or environmental change. It changes something by changing a cultural norm. But some sort of change has to happen. It can't just be a message. And so we've identified at least 3 different ways that you can do that, through knowledge, through policy, through culture. And I'm sure there are other ways too. But what we have to look at is before we even start creating our campaigns, we have to first say, what are we trying to change? And if our minds go blank, then we need to think a little harder, because we're not there yet. We're not ready to create our program yet until we know what needs to change. And we have to not only are we changing something, but that thing that we're going to change is actually connected to the behavior that we're trying to influence. Because there are plenty of things we could change and have no impact as well. So it's change that matters. The third difference is that commercial marketing targets the most likely customer. Social marketing usually targets the least likely customer. This is a very important difference. Smokers don't want to hear about not smoking. Binge drinkers don't want to hear about drinking less. Polluters don't want to hear about conservation. Our target audience is fundamentally different from the target audience of most commercial brands. And that requires that our approach be fundamentally different as well. When Pepsi goes after their audience, they first have to preserve their brand. They have to say, we're not going to alienate our customers. We have to keep them. And then we're going to grow our bubble just a little bit. We're going to go to the closest neighbors to them. Someone who's maybe drank Pepsi before, but isn't drinking it right now. We're going to go as close as we can because we don't want to hurt the core of our business. Us, on the other hand, if we do that, it's called preaching to the choir. We have to go to people who don't want anything to do with us and somehow convince them that what we're saying is worth listening to. And that's different. And it requires that we realize that and acknowledge that at the very beginning of our planning process in order to be able to cause any effective change. The last difference is that commercial marketing requires brand awareness to be successful. But social marketing does not require brand awareness to be successful. This is probably my most controversial of all my differences. And to explain it to you, I'm gonna actually have a friend do that.
Both those belts look exactly the same to me. I'm still learning about this stuff and
This stuff? Oh, okay. I see. You think this has nothing to do with you. You go to your closet and you select, I don't know, that lumpy blue sweater, for instance, because you're trying to tell the world that you take yourself too seriously to care about what you put on your back. But what you don't know is that that sweater is not just blue, it's not turquoise, it's not lapis, it's actually cerulean. And you're also blithely unaware of the fact that in 2002, Oscar de la Renta did a collection of cerulean gowns, and then I think it was Yves Saint Laurent, wasn't it, who showed cerulean military jackets? I think we need a jacket here. And then cerulean quickly showed up in the collections of 8 different designers. And then it filtered down through the department stores and then trickled on down into some tragic casual corner where you no doubt fished it out of some clearance bin. However, that blue represents millions of dollars and countless jobs. And it's sort of comical how you think that you've made a choice that exempts you from the fashion industry when in fact you're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
No one says it better than Meryl. What she's alluding to is that influence travels on its own, right? And in the commercial world, brands, knowing the brand awareness is necessary because if you don't know the name of the brand, then you can't buy the product, right? So they have to make sure that you know that name when you go and buy that product. However, the behavior itself travels without the brand name. So, for example, let's say that I have a campaign called, Super Duper Anti-Smoking Campaign, okay? And you hear about Super Duper Anti-Smoking Campaign and you decide to stop smoking. Now, the row behind you also smoke, but they really look up to you. They think you're really cool because of your outfit. And they decide to stop smoking too, 5 of them. They never heard about Super Duper Anti-Smoking Campaign. All they did was see that guy stopped smoking and decided to stop smoking themselves. Now, in my little micro group here of 6 people, I only had a 1/6 of them were the only ones that actually were aware of my campaign. They were the only ones that would recognize my brand name if they took a survey. However, 100% of them were changed by my campaign. That's a success in social marketing. And the thing is that would never work in the commercial marketing. Creative directors' minds would explode if you ever told them that we don't need 100% awareness to be effective. And what we have to realize is that behavior is different from brands. Behavior is different from the commercial world. Behavior travels on its own. And if we pick and choose the right people, and I'm showing here Rogers' innovation adoption curve that talks about how innovators and early adopters are the ones that are deciding a lot of the behaviors that the rest of us end up adopting. That if we're able to target them first and reach them effectively, we may not ever need to talk to anybody else because everyone else would eventually follow along. And this kind of turns everything on its head because this whole time we were thinking, oh, well, we need to, I need $100 million so that I can have a campaign and I can put TV commercials everywhere and everyone will know my name. That's how I know I will be successful. But that's not true. You could be nimble. You could target the right people and you could cause impact without most of them even knowing that you were the reason they changed. Just like that young lady didn't know that it was those fashion designers that she loathed, that she tried to stay away from, that actually decided what she was going to wear. So what we need to do as a social marketing community is, if we really want this to grow, if we want to come back to this conference in 2 years and see that it's twice as big, if we want to see that our government officials are talking about social marketing, well, we have to stand up for it. We have to stand up and not be nice to each other, be frank with each other. Everyone can try again. I've made mistakes. Just try again. And do it better the next time. Figure out what went wrong. We have to stop focusing on awareness. That's not the key to behavior change. We have to stop targeting everyone. There's no case where everybody needs to change. I can't think of a single situation where every single person in your community has to be reached by a message. Who needs to be reached and why? Stop preaching to the choir. We don't need to be like Pepsi. We don't have to keep our customers while we grow. We can actually create a whole new base of customers, of ex-smokers who are still just as rebellious and just as gritty and grungy as they always were, but they just don't like smoking anymore. We can do that. We don't have to make them look like non-smokers to do that. This is not commercial marketing. This is social marketing. Now, let's change something. Let's change something in our communities. Let's change something in the cultures that we target. And I'm going to show you a quick example of how we've done this and hopefully inspire you to do the same. When we pick a path, it's important to first understand at what state is the behavior that you're trying to change. We do a lot of work in tobacco prevention. For the most part, tobacco prevention is no longer in the knowledge change category. People know what's wrong with it. Policy change, depending on where you are, California, New York, Australia, I think the UK as well, is pretty strong on policy. We're reaching the point of diminishing returns there. So for the most part, tobacco prevention is in culture change mode. We've done what we can in some other areas, and now we got to find something else to change because we got these stubborn people that are still smoking. Depending on the country you're in, you might not be there. You might still be on knowledge. You might still be on policy. And that's important for you to assess and to determine where you are with your community. So for culture change, we use a strategy we call social branding. And social branding really is based on this concept that who you are motivates behavior more powerfully than what you know, your identity. The friends that you belong to, the people that influence you, that influences your behavior sometimes more powerfully than the information that you have in your head. And we use this to influence our segmentation strategy. And of course, segmentation was classifying markets into distinct segments that behave in similar ways or have similar needs. Segmentation is a critical component of social marketing that we so often ignore. Okay? Just because your funding is restricted to your state or city or country, and so you're only reaching people in your state, city, or country, doesn't mean you've geographically segmented. All right? Don't check off the box and say you've segmented. You're not there yet. We need to do more segmentation. Race, ethnicity, and gender are usually just proxy measures of something more meaningful. Because this data is easy, we often cling to it and say, this is how I'm going to segment. But in reality, this is the only time that you were defined by your race, gender, or ethnicity, was when you were born. And ever since then, you've made decisions that have created an actual human being, not just a black guy or a Hispanic woman. And those decisions that you've made have defined your lifestyle. And so anytime that we decide our segmentation based on demographics, we're essentially using 20, 30, or 40-year-old data. The last time, that was the only thing that mattered about our audience. So we got to go deeper. It's not just about segmentation. It's not just about demographics. We have to understand how it is that identity and behavior come together, how it is that people look up to others who are like them and learn from them how to be the person that they want to be, form associations, and then decide to act. Many times they tell you, well, they just felt like engaging in a behavior. But in reality, it was a long process of observing, acknowledging, finding patterns, and forming these subconscious associations between certain behaviors and certain identities. We understand what identities they are by using images. We use images because it's very hard for people to describe their cultures and to use the same words as other people. And so when we targeted young adults who use tobacco use, we found these are some of the cultures that different young adults identify with. And we found that the hipster culture actually has a lot more smoking than all of these other cultures. Cultures that, mind you, the tobacco industry has named by name in their documents 25 years ago. So 25 years ago, Marlboro was talking about hipsters. Walk into the CDC, and you're going to find only a handful of people who know what the term hipster actually means. And so this is a very important distinction of what we're paying attention to and what we're not paying attention to. So we created Commune. Commune is a movement of artists, designers, musicians, and people that take a stand against tobacco corporations and their presence in the scene. And the strategy is designed to change the association between being a hipster and smoking. And to do that by acknowledging the values of this community, which are very kind of buy local, support local artists, support local musicians, and to use that as a catalyst for rejecting this big corporate empire of tobacco that does a lot of harm on our world. This is what hipsters look like, in case you weren't familiar. They like facial hair and tattoos. And here's a little description of what Commune is like.
My name is Pam Ling, and I'm an associate professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. And I've been working on the evaluation for Commune for the past 4 years. In the United States, and in California in particular, smoking rates are going down. However, smoking is still a problem for certain groups, and one of those groups are young adults. I think it's been difficult for public health programs to reach young adults, in part because they're a very mobile population. They're not all in school, and this is an age where there's a lot of experimentation, there's a lot of mobility, and where you have very strong targeted marketing from the tobacco companies. The Commune campaign is really designed to appeal specifically to a subculture of young adults, in this case hipsters, and to really understand why would hipsters care about smoking and what is the piece of tobacco control that they can actually connect to. What we do to evaluate this is kind of special. One is that you can't use a telephone survey or a traditional survey to evaluate this campaign. You have to get young adults from the bars to do your surveys. So what we actually found was that the best way to do the evaluation is to go to the bar and do the survey in the bars with the people you're really trying to reach. And we do about 1,000 surveys a year with young adults from San Diego in the hipster bars. And we do that at baseline, and then we do it again during the campaign and all the way through as long as we can. We found some interesting things in San Diego. First of all, we found out that hipsters smoke at extremely high rates. In the bar, about 50% of the young adults you talk to will have smoked in the past 30 days. What we've also found is that when you look over time in San Diego, the hipster smoking rates have decreased significantly. Young adult hipsters were exposed to the campaign, and those who are the highest risk, meaning the ones who care the most about their social life and go out the most, actually had the highest levels of exposure. And they also had the highest smoking rates. And then as we followed up with a series of surveys over 3 years, we found significant decreases in smoking amongst hipsters, and especially among those who really socialize a lot. So you also might worry that if you do a campaign in the bar, that people might compensate for not smoking by drinking more. What we actually found was the opposite, that in San Diego, we saw significant decreases in binge drinking over the course of the campaign. So the next steps for Commune are a couple of things. First of all, we're going to replicate what's happened in San Diego in another city. In this case, that's going to be San Francisco, an even cooler city. The second step is we're going to collect data in a city where there's no intervention. We're going to start collecting data in Los Angeles and compare what's happening in LA with nothing to the Commune campaigns in San Francisco and San Diego. The third thing we're going to do is take this strategy outside of California, and we're going to combine the evaluations of all of these campaigns to really get a better sense of the effectiveness of this strategy on a larger scale.
So these are the rates that Pam was talking about. So by changing the thing that needed to be changed, in this particular audience, the solution wasn't to make TV commercials. It wasn't to do some of the traditional things that we've done. It was to go into the culture, to find those trendsetters, and to get those trendsetters to be a part of the message of our culture is now moving away from tobacco use. And by embracing that message and finding the right people, we're able over 3 years to reduce significantly from about 60% tobacco use amongst hipsters at the beginning to about 48% currently. And the campaign has at least 3 more years of funding to see if we can hopefully get it down even further beyond that. And you know, the shocking part about this is that by figuring out what we actually needed to do, we found out that what we needed to do wasn't very expensive. Every year we spend about $150,000 on this campaign and are causing bigger effects than multi-million-dollar campaigns can sometimes cause. Yes, low budgets. Effect with low budgets definitely deserves applause. But it's not so much about being frugal. It's about knowing what are the strategies that you actually need and what are the ones that maybe are flashy, exciting, and everyone wants them, but do you actually need them in your community? So in conclusion, I hope I wasn't too confrontational. I'm actually a really nice guy. But my goal here today is to really bring this all and be the villain because I care about social marketing. You know, this is something that I've been committed to my entire adult life, and it's something that I hope to stay committed to, but I can only do so not if my work is good, but if all of our work is good. Because if all of our work isn't good, then all of our work will be challenged by the folks who actually pay for it. So thank you very much.